Welcome to the Steering Change Podcast, navigating through the commercial transportation industry in Alberta and beyond, powered by the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Here's your host, Kelsey Hipkin.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to today's episode. The team here at AMTA does a series of quarterly campaigns, usually with a focus on safety, but an overarching theme of anything having to do with commercial transportation. In the first quarter of this year, we brought you a distracted driving campaign. In the second quarter, we did Spring into Safety. And for the third quarter of the year, we're bringing you trucking, past, present, and future. Today, we're going to take a trip down memory lane when it comes to commercial transportation in Alberta. And we're going to do that with some actual voices of the past and those who continue to support and advance industry after years in the field. To know Alberta's trucking past is to know the individuals who built the foundation of what commercial transportation represents today. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize the efforts of two individuals who have been key to maintaining the history of our industry and in preparing today's episode. In the early 1980s, June Drinnan, wife of former AMTA President Bob Drinnan, compiled cassette recordings of dozens of people involved in building the commercial transportation industry in Alberta. AMTA still has those tapes today, and it was from those cassettes a second individual, Paul Rubak, former AMTA Historical Award winner, gathered information for the book Big Wheels Across the Prairie, A History of Trucking in Alberta. Without June and Paul, a lot of the stories you'll hear today would have been lost, so on behalf of industry, I really want to send major kudos to them, wherever they may be, for their efforts. Now, my friends, let me take you back all the way to 1882. 1882 was when the Canadian Pacific Railway was the first rail to cross Alberta, reaching Medicine Hat, Calgary, and Banff. Trucks wouldn't be used in Canada until 1898, when the first commercial trucks used were electric-powered No. 2 coach delivery wagon. That was in Toronto. And before that, it was trains or beasts who hauled everything across the country. Less than 30 years later, in 1926, 4,362 truck units of all types would be registered in Alberta. In 1932, the Duff Commission released a report recommending the general regulation of major transportation in Canada. And in 1938, Jack Taylor of Calgary is hired as the first general manager of a group of local urban trucking companies who would call themselves the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Around that same time, Lyle Lebert of what would become Lyle Transport was just starting to get into the industry.
And in 1933, the next summer, he came home with a new truck, 1933 Chevy, and he said he's going to start hauling gas. Well, nobody had ever hauled gas by tank to Saskatchewan in 1933. And he had borrowed $50 from the salesman to buy the truck with. From a fellow from General Supplies, and he was a sales manager at that time. He was a real nice guy. And he loaned Dad $50 to buy that truck. And we didn't have any money for a tank or a cradle, as we called it, to put the tank in, so we lived over there on 21st Avenue, 4th Street West, and we cut the cradle out of some 2x6s that Dad had brought home, and so they fit the tank. And he got got Willard Welding over on 4th Street West. They were found by Robert to make him a tank, and he didn't have any money. So Willard made him the tank. And I think it was about the first tank that was ever made in this town to haul gasoline.
The tank Lyle mentioned held 1,000 gallons, and according to Big Wheels Across the Prairie and Lyle's memory, was the first tank truck to haul gasoline out of Turner Valley. Lyle Transport was also involved in another historic first in Alberta.
And I went to work for Greyhound in 1937. And in the spring of 1938, 38 or 39, they decided we could haul fruit from Spokane. And nobody had ever done that before, and we didn't have any money. And we went to McDonald's Consolidated, which is Safeway stores, and they had a manager whose name was Mr. Buchanan, and he said, well, if you can get down there, we'll get you a load. So we went down there and we hauled lettuce out of Yakima Valley into Calgary, which was a first for anybody. And then in 1939, we were the first ones to haul fruit out of California.
That was a long ways for you to go.
Yeah, we didn't have any money either. And we never had a refrigerator.
No, of course not.
And we never lost. We had the first load of fruit that was ever hauled in Calgary. We hauled was in a load of Santa Rosa plums out of Santa Rosa County, and never lost a plum. We put 2 barrels of ice, one in the front, one in the back,
My golly.
and brought them to Calgary for Barker fruit, and that was the first fruit that was ever hauled from.
Lyle would go on to serve in the Air Force in the Second World War and served as AMTA president in 1965. Now, moving into the late 1940s, we see the emergence of Alberta's truck driving rodeo. These events provided an opportunity for drivers to showcase their skills by performing a number of tasks on a track. Now known as the Professional Truck Driving Championship, or PTDC, the event remains a favorite of AMTA and drivers alike, celebrating 75 years in 2025. At our 2024 PTDC, we took the time to chat with some longtime attendees to discuss the championship and trucking in general. You're now going to hear from Gordon Hughes and Rick Boulay. Rick was with Inland Concrete, now Heidelberg Materials, for 35 years, 25 of those with Gord, who we'll hear from first on his involvement with PTDC. And Gordon, you were a repeat mechanic for a long time. How long did you...
Probably 15 years that Rick and I did this together, and I introduced Brandon, brought him on to carry on the torch. Hopefully that we could carry on and do what we're doing still, and that was Rick's and my ultimate goal, is to try and carry on and see somebody else carries up what we started.
And speaking of passing the torch, both Gord and Rick also touched on the importance of an event like PTDC. Here's Rick.
I think it's very important for the industry to stay alive, because everything that we have has come on a truck at some point.
So Rick touches on a really important point there. Going back to our timeline, the National Railway strike in the 1950s was a catalyst for Alberta truckers to become more involved in hauling freight between the province and Ontario. However, they were hampered by maximum gross vehicle weights. On that topic, you'll now hear from Jim Chapman of Buyers Transport, as interviewed by June Drinnan. Born in Reading, England, Jim Chapman came to Canada in 1905. He bought his first commercial truck in 1934, and in 1943 was hired to haul materials on the newly constructed Alaskan Highway. 5 years later, in 1948, Morris Byers invited Jim to become half owner of Buyers Transport.
And then they began, well, was it the AMTA that was pushing the government for greater weights then, was it?
Oh, that's right, yes.
Yeah, because you realized you could...
I'm certain that the Alberta Motor Transport Association was totally responsible for the weights in Alberta and reciprocity in Alberta and a great many other things that happened in Alberta to further and benefit truck transport came about as a direct result of the efforts of the association, and more power to Jack and his odd way of doing things. He had a way of getting them done. Really, just a very, very few of us formulated policy and carried out the functions of the young association without too much help from anyone else, membership-wise or anything, and it was several years before we could count our annual meeting in numbers of, say, up to 100 people.
Mm-hmm. The reason I knew this was because I've been reading the old minutes, and in the minutes there, just about everyone is Jim Chapman, he's always there, and I thought, well, you were a very loyal member.
Well, I was very interested, June. I could see right from the start that there were a lot of things that we didn't like that the government was doing, and they were doing, I suppose, a lot of them for our own good. But I can remember how incensed I was when they said you're going to have to put marker lights on the front and rear of your trailer, and you're going to have a brake light on. And we didn't have that. And then they said you have to have signal arms. And who ever heard of signal arms? No such a thing as that.
No.
But it all came about in good time. And so some of the original wiring jobs that were done on these clearance lights, as we call them now, were pretty rudimentary, I'll tell you.
They must have been.
Oh yeah, they weren't nothing built in. It was all tacked on, and as long as it worked, boy, that was the main thing.
Chapman was director of AMTA in our early years and served as president from 1954 to 1958. Jim Chapman passed away in 1997. The early 1950s was also a key time for Al Beats of Economy Carriers. Al is a storied name with AMTA, as he won AMTA Service to Industry Award in 1965 and 1984, and the AMTA Historical Award in 2001. In this clip, Al discusses working with his mentor, Sam McGahey. It was McGahey who suggested economy carriers provide freight to and from Claresholm, Alberta, after the small town's other local carrier failed to provide good service. It was after this, Sam approached Al with another opportunity to purchase another terminal.
He said, if you fellows were to come in with me, I would consider, building another building and keeping the terminal going. I said, that's fine, Sam, but we haven't got any money, which we didn't have, to go into any further business. We were doing, that's all we could do to have get enough finances to run our trucks. So he said, okay, I'll lend you the money to come into business with us. And as a result, we formed the Maple Leaf Truck Terminal Limited. Prior to that, it was Maple Leaf Truck Terminal.
Claresholm was lucrative for economy carriers, and we'll let Al tell you why.
And then when we started running the trucks to Claresholm, it was my job to administrate that or manage that as well. So I couldn't drive full time. We now hired drivers. Harry stayed on the gas trucks driving. When I say part-time, I dispatched part-time in the terminal, and I drove pickup truck a lot of the time, or most of the time. I didn't go out on the road so much anymore because, of course, managing it, I had to be longer. That turned out to be, well, at that time, quite a lucrative bit of cash flow for us. The other trucking company subsequently folded.
Benner's, that is folded.
That was Benner's, yeah. It was still running under Benner's. Then, of course, we had all the business into Claresholm, and that was quite a lucrative run. I think we ended up probably running 4 or 5 trucks into Claresholm, always 2 and sometimes 3 or 4. The Air Force base was still operating there, and that was quite a big thing at that time. Maybe we should have a breather for a minute while I get my thoughts in shape.
Okay, I'll shut her down.
In late 1983, Al and his brothers Harry and Harvey made the decision to let the next generation take over at economy carriers. Al Beats passed away in 2010. Let's move into the swinging 60s. At this time, CB radios were introduced in Canada. And around that time, Ed Caron of Caron Transportation Systems came to the understanding there was a large untapped market in transporting chemicals. So Ed took it upon himself to build tanks to meet customer needs. According to Big Wheels Across the Prairies, all tanks manufactured by the company were thoroughly inspected and met rigorous standards. We'll let Ed tell you more in his own words.
I think it was in 1960, 63, 62, I came out with special equipment that the customer would demand, and then I turned around and built my own tankers accordingly to the customer and follow the ICC regulation. The ICC regulation in Canada is not recognized. Plus, I got all the information from US. From there, I built accordingly. Then I specialized, and I still do. I have what I think the finest type of equipment to haul any type of any type of chemical, bulk, name it, I have it.
And where
If we don't have it, we build it.
Where do you haul this to, from and to? Where do you go?
Now, we haul from here, from Alberta. I have the rights, Alberta, Saskatchewan, part of Manitoba, Northwest Territory, Yukon, and British Columbia. And U.S., mind you, U.S. is a great thing.
Where in the U.S.?
For me. Well, there's Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Detroit, Michigan.
Big Wheels Across the Prairie continue to read. In 1981, Ed was proud to say that his company still built their own tankers and were quick to respond to any special needs their customers required for the hauling of their products. The 1980s were also when the Motor Vehicle Transport Act, now known as the Traffic Safety Act, was passed, the first step to deregulation of the Canadian trucking industry. In that same decade, Rocky Mountain double combinations were permitted at 29 meters and 53,500 kilograms. Moving on to the 90s, AMTA launched the Partners in Compliance program to showcase carriers of excellence. In 2025, PIC was replaced with the Alberta government's Alberta Carrier Excellence Safety Program, or ACES. And speaking of the 2000s, it was in this time Alberta Transportation approved the use of new generation wide-base single tires on provincial roadways. And with that, we arrived where we are today in 2025. Through it all, commercial carriers and drivers have been steadfast in keeping goods on the move. AMTA Immediate Past Board Chair Doug Paisley, also interviewed in 2024, touched on the importance of the work drivers do and how that can be reflected in an event like the Professional Truck Driving Championship, and in turn, how that can extend to commercial driver Red Seal recognition.
Well, for the drivers themselves, it's a pride thing, it's a camaraderie thing. I think that's one of the biggest deficiencies. I don't think people truly understand what's involved in being a professional truck driver and a Class 1 operator, and I think that's a pretty critical point. I mean, the ability to get around the track and do what you do, you got to have a good day and things have got to line up for you, but from the standpoint of, putting it out there and having a national championship for professional truck drivers to go in and showcase their abilities and skills, I just think it continues to build to the pride factor, the certification on the wall, the trade certification or professional designation that's missing. This is, I don't know how they can't at the federal level understand that, the national occupational standard should include truck drivers as professionals, because it's not there yet, but we're getting there and we'll keep banging that drum until we get there. And whether it's a Red Seal Journeyman certification or a micro-credentialing certification, they do deserve to be called pros, because anybody running up and down the highway pulling 100,000 pounds at 100 kilometers an hour in control of 550 horsepower and 1,750 foot-pounds of torque, that's a missile. So they're pros.
Yeah. Thank you, listeners, for coming along on this journey from the past. And stay tuned for our next episode dropping August 1st, in which we take a look at trucking in the present. And then we're going to head into the future of industry on August 15th. As per usual, we'll close with some AMTA news. Volunteer registration is now open and filling very fast for Driver Appreciation Days taking place September 8th to 17th. The only locations yet to fill all volunteer slots are Dunmore, Whitecourt, and Hinton. For full event details, including locations and dates, check the show notes or visit amta.ca. Are you curious about the various AMTA memberships or how you can get involved with the association? Reach out to membership@amta.ca. And finally, do you have any questions or comments about the Steering Change episodes? Reach out on our Instagram at AMTA_CA or LinkedIn and Facebook at Alberta Motor Transport Association. Stay safe and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AMTA's Steering Change podcast. The views expressed by guests of the Steering Change podcast are their own and may not reflect the views of AMTA, its hosts, or sponsors. Did you have a question that you would like answered on an upcoming episode of the Steering Change podcast? We want to hear from you. To submit a question to the Steering Change mailbag, hit up our DMs on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram with the hashtag Steering Change, and your question will be answered either live on the podcast or by one of our SMEs here at AMTA. We ask that you share this episode with those in your network that could benefit from what we discussed today, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you can be notified when future episodes are released. You can learn more about us and our mission by visiting www.amta.ca. Now get out there and have a safe day.